All right, welcome into the EMAW Online podcast as we are live yet again after a much worse feeling game than the Michigan State victory for K State on Thursday. K State could have become the first team to go into the Final Four. Instead, they were the first team to lose in the Elite Eight this year, and it was in heartbreaking fashion because K State played pretty poorly through the first half, but they survived it well enough, and they even went out to get a 7-point lead in the second half, but they could never get that next bucket to kind of get them over the hump and make it feel like maybe it was a little bit calmer. And then they had a stretch in the second half where they just absolutely hurt themselves by going over 5 minutes without a basket, and they let Florida Atlantic go on a run, and the Owls were able to take care of business. I mean, they shot the ball kind of like what you would have expected them to do. They're a team that likes to shoot it. They have plenty of shooters, and they knocked them down tonight. And K-State matched them for the most part. K-State was 45% from three in the game, so it's not like K-State was bad there. The issue just was more of Florida Atlantic hitting timely threes and K-State not really giving enough resistance to those threes that were being put up. So I don't know. There's a lot of thoughts. There are a lot of things to get into in this game. Marquise Noel was incredible again. It's unfortunate that he plays that well and has this stretch to end his career, but it's not going to end in Houston like it maybe should have. And I mean, he didn't get any help tonight. Desi Sills was in foul trouble in the game against Michigan State. They survived that, but Keontae Johnson, when you're second lead, or I guess he's really your leading scorer, but since conference play, he's your second leading scorer. When he gets into foul trouble, it's going to take you out of it, make it really tough. So a lot to dive into over the next however long as we try to, like I said on the tweet, mourn, laugh, cry, whatever you want to feel right now after that game. Go for it. What I'm feeling right now is yelling at my dog because she keeps licking the crap out of herself down here, and I'm going to lose it on her. So she needs to be better about that, and we'll dive into the Cats here. So, Gabe, just immediate takeaways from the game between K-State and FAU.
Oh, man. My first immediate takeaway, that's not overarching, but just kind of the thing that'll sit with me for a while, is Marquise Noel opting for a quick two with Naquan Tomlin over a step back three where he had created some space. Surprisingly, Vlad Golden played drop coverage and gave him the three, which I thought was odd. I mean, maybe it was the fact that a lot of the drives late Marquise was getting the whistle for, but the fact that Marquise passes that up and takes the two, I'm not going to say that in the moment I didn't think it was the right thing, because in the moment I said in the room that I was watching in, that's a good move. Like, FAU's a bad free throw shooting team. They've already split a pair or missed front ends a couple times. Like, I think it's good to go for the two, bet on a foul and them going 1 of 2 or 0 for 2 at the line, and then all you need is a 2 for the win or 2 for the tie. But I didn't necessarily think it was the wrong move. I just thought it was different than what I expected out of Marquise Noel. And then on the last possession, it looked like he expected to be taken away, and he just willingly gave the ball away and was looking for Ish Massoud, because when he passes past mid-court, he never put his eyes on the rim. And that shocks me for the guy that he is, the willingness that he has to take the shots from deep. But I guess it just ends up being his run looks a lot more Steph Curry than it does Kemba Walker. And it was absolutely fantastic. I think he ends up third all time in tournament assists in one singular tournament. I think he finishes with 51, or was it 52 or 53? Something along those lines. But he's just a special player, special run. Disappointed that there was not a shot getting up at the end, because regardless of whether it goes in or not, like, those are the moments you live for in March. And just to see the ball, to see the season end with it just stripped away from Ish Massoud feels wrong.
Yeah. No, that's for sure. Because it's just really it's I don't know. It's just really tough to I don't know. It's just very tough to have us go down like that when you have a guy like Marquise Noel that can make the shot from wherever on the floor, and he doesn't get one off, or um, the way that I see that playing out, like he just came down the floor expecting to get fouled, and he knew that we can't afford to foul here. Like we're running out of time. We have to get the shot off. We have to get the look, and Ish Masood in 2 straight games has hit massive threes for them. He's been able to find Ish and make something happen out of it. So it makes sense that you would try that and whatever else. But he threw it to Ish, and I think Ish in that moment is thinking to himself, "Do I get this back to Marquise? Do I shoot this now? There's still some time. What's the move?" And basically, I think just in the time that it took him to process what needed to happen in that moment, Florida Atlantic swarmed him, and then there was absolutely nothing he could do with the ball, and the clock expired, and that's how K-State falls in the Elite Eight. So, I mean, I talked about it going in, and it rings true. Um, K-State losing three straight Elite Eights to mid-major teams that are lower seeds than you, or higher, lower, however you want to figure it. It's a higher number, I guess, but lower on the seed line. That's pretty painful to take in. Like it doesn't matter the caliber of team. Like that Butler team was great, but at the end of the day, you think K-State should beat Butler in the Elite Eight. And at the end of the day, K-State should beat Loyola, and they should beat Florida Atlantic in the Elite Eight, and they just weren't able to get it done. Probably outside of not getting the final shot off, the other big note is going to be Keontae Johnson fouling out. And it's interesting to look at that because he went through stretches this year where he was in foul trouble a good amount, or he had some really dumb ones early in games that took him out of the last X amount of minutes of the first half. And he got the best of both worlds today. He missed a good chunk of the first half, and then he ended up fouling out of the game. Some of them you could maybe raise an eyebrow at. The other part of it too is, though, like you talked about it, when he had 3 fouls, like he just can't be trying to take a charge right there.
Correct.
Whether it was one or not, it's just too risky of a play. Just move on, give up the bucket, move on, whatever you have to do there. And just unfortunately, he tried making some smart basketball plays in them. He gets a foul on diving for a loose ball. Like he gets more fouls called on him for doing things that you should probably try to do in basketball. But he's just such a big guy that sometimes you're just going to have more mass to get in the way and get physical with somebody. So tough to not have him out there for a majority of the game. That's going to contribute to kind of the what ifs of K-State's season right here.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back and you go through the 5 fouls, the first foul he gets for being in the way of a guy who is attempting to get a rebound. Like he literally commits a foul, and then he's grabbing his face because a guy ran through his chin. So that's foul 1. Foul number 2 is he's stumbling to try to catch a ball in transition because Marquise Noel threw the ball at his feet, which I don't think was a great pass by Marquise.
Yeah, it wasn't a good pass.
His doing. Very unlucky. Foul number 3 was diving for a loose ball, which as a coach, you're like, good effort, all those types of things. Foul number 4 is trying to take a charge, effort play. And then foul number 5 was him attacking the glass for an offensive rebound and a kid embellishing some contact, is the way I saw it. It looked very, I forget which kid it was for FAU, but it looked a little David Gasani of I just got shot and I'm now hitting the floor about as hard as I possibly could. So when you break the fouls down that way, it leaves a lot to be desired because they were not productive fouls and they were somewhat unlucky. And I would say one of them was just not a great situational. Like the only one where I think was a poor situational decision is the attempt to take a charge with 3 fouls with 14 minutes left in the second half in a 2-point game. Like you can afford to just give away 2, and it wouldn't even have been just giving away 2 because there was I think Desi Sills was right next to him. Like there was going to be a contest on the play. So that sucks. And it feels like when top seeded teams lose, you always end up looking and being like, man, that game from that guy who typically delivered all season long, really put a damper on things. And it sucks because you got another 30 and 12 from Marquise, and you just needed one guy to go running mate with him. And Naquan Tomlin's good. I think he's going to be great next year. But Naquan Tomlin was not ready for being the number 2 in this situation. And neither was Desi. Neither the Cam Carter's not that guy. He's just not that guy.
No.
And nobody else was able to be it. So that part sucks.
Well, it's funny. We talked however long about when K-State gets to the tournament, they're going to have all these games lined up to where they will have the 2 best players on the floor. Certainly would have been true tonight against Florida Atlantic. The problem for K-State was for only 18 minutes of the game, they had the 2 best players on the floor because Keontae Johnson couldn't play in the other 22. And that is the ultimate killer right there is Keontae Johnson. He was good when he was in. Like he was scoring pretty efficiently tonight. He was 4 of 7, 9 points. Now, the other killer, he misses 3 free throws in the game. Ish Massoud also misses a free throw in the game that was significant. Marquise Noel missed a free throw, which you thought, oh, man, this is a sign of not good things to come. Desi Sills missed a free throw as well. K-State was 12 of 18 at the free throw line tonight. And you mentioned Florida Atlantic. They're not like a great free throw shooting team, 71% on the year. They were great tonight, 81%, closer to 82% than 81 even at 18 of 22. And that's, I mean, the recipe for how this game played out is how a team like Florida Atlantic has to win that game. K-State lost one of their best players to foul trouble. He couldn't be out there. And Florida Atlantic capitalized on K-State not doing the little things well. And Florida Atlantic, in the return, actually doing them. And so that's a big killer right there to look at how it worked. And just tough to see for K-State and how that ends up going down. A couple of other notables from the game. Naquan Tomlin had the 6 rebounds. Nobody else on the team had more than 3. Marquise Noel was the second leading rebounder in the game, tied with Cam Carter for the second most rebounds in the game for K-State at 3. And then Keontae had 2. You get 0 from Gasson, 0 from Bebe in his 5 minutes, 0 from Tyke in his 5 minutes, 1 from Ish Massoud during that stretch. And that's the other thing that you can withstand getting out rebounded by Kentucky. That makes sense. It's unfathomable to be out rebounded 44-22 by Florida Atlantic. I mean, I know that Vlad Golden is a big dude inside, but they had a 7'1" dude and they had a 6'8" dude, and that's all they had that they play. And that's another real kicker for K-State. And it goes to show where the growth needs to be for guys like Naquan Tomlin and David Gasson.
Yeah, you cannot be playing. How many minutes was it for Gasson? 16 minutes and have 0 rebounds. I would say getting out rebounded by Florida Atlantic 44-22 is, and I would use a word before the word pathetic, but it would require me to do 10 push-ups. But like, that is what that is. That is atrocious. It's embarrassing. And like in a game of this magnitude where there's so much on the line and there's an art to wanting it more than people. And like, sometimes wanting it more than people means you do too much on the offensive end. I don't think K-State, I mean, yes, K-State did some things in the second half where they had chances to go ahead and they did too much and it led to turnovers. But like, you still won the turnover battle overall in the game. So I'm not worried about that. But at some point you got to want it more than people and like put your ass into a guy and box out. And Naquan Tomlin, I understand he's a little skinny. The offensive rebound that led to the second chance points at 72-69 to make it 74-69 is just unfathomably bad situationally. It wasn't a bad bounce. It was just a lack of boxing out.
Second chance points in the game, 15-2 Florida Atlantic wins that. The other killer, I can think of 3 specific times. There may have been another 1 or 2 tossed in there, but K-State on missed free throws by Florida Atlantic gives up an offensive rebound. That is incredibly hard to do because you have 4 guys right there to get a rebound. The other team has 2, and most teams concede essentially. Like you really do have to not want it to give up a rebound on a free throw like that. Maybe you get a bad bounce occasionally, whatever, that will happen. But for it to happen multiple times over in this game, like that just showcases one of the deficiencies that K-State had today. The other part that ties into this, Keontae's not like just some, out of this world rebounder, but it did, like, he is taken out of the game, not only for the fact that he only played 18 minutes, but like he just can't give as much in certain areas defensively and offensively because of the foul trouble. He has to play a little bit differently, which is also what makes him trying to take that charge so odd, is that there were moments where he understands, like, I got to back off a little bit here, but then he still in that moment tried to make the play to get the ball back. Just kind of tough to take in. Marquise Noel, though, let's focus on him and give him his flowers right now, because very, very, very impressive what he did tonight. Like, he was trying to will K-State into this and give them a chance. K-State's going to be getting ready to go to the podium in probably 10 to 20 minutes. So if you switch over from us and you want to go watch that on the March Madness YouTube page, I won't blame you. That's going to be a very tough press conference to watch. Like, that's going to be right up there with Jacob Pullen after the loss to Wisconsin in 2011, because Jacob Pullen, very similar to Marquise Noel, are going to end their impressive careers at K-State with 30-plus point performances, yet their team still loses. And that's very tough, because Noel was great tonight again. 30 points. He was 5 of 11 from 3, 12 assists. Few more turnovers than what he had, but you're going to live with a guy that has 12 assists and 5 turnovers. And some of the turnovers that are on him were kind of just on his teammates not being ready for his passes, which, maybe a few were like a little too hot to handle, but to some extent, like, they didn't look like they were ready for him.
Drop off to Tomlin in transition.
Yeah, and like, you've played with the dude for how many games now? Has it been like, 35? You should probably be aware that Marquise is going to try and find you between the legs with a bounce pass. And like, that was a bad one that Naquan missed. Some of those dump offs inside you talked about, like, he was on it again. He was every bit as good as he needed to be in this game for K-State to win. Unfortunately, like, when you take Keontae Johnson away, that is what K-State is. Like, they are a team that they have one dude that can give you the world, but the other team can match that at a pretty good level. And that's what ended up happening without Keontae on the floor. So Marquise Noel was great. His brother equally is great on the mic'd up segments of the broadcast. That was good for the Noel family, and unfortunately won't be getting any of those in Houston next week. A few other things from the game that stand out. I briefly mentioned it when we opened things up here. But the fact that K-State ends up going on a stretch there where, let's see if I can find the exact moment. So they end up taking the lead 63 to 57. And they don't score.
That was Noel 3.
Yes, that was at the 8:39 mark. They do not score another field goal until 147 on a Marquise Noel 3 to cut it to 72 to 69. In that stretch, they got a missed 3 from Tomlin, a missed layup by Marquise, an air ball from Keontae Johnson when he came back into the game, a missed 3 from Ish Massoud, a missed layup from Marquise, a missed jumper from Keontae, and a missed 3 from Noel. K-State lost 7 points in that stretch. And then eventually Noel hits a 3 to bring it within 3 at 72 to 69. That's just a killer stretch for them to go that long without a made basket. And then in terms of what that run ends up being for K-State, let's see. So puts them up 6 in that moment. Let's see what the run ends up looking like there. So over that stretch where they let the lead inch out to 8, they let FAU go on a 15-1 run over a 5:55 mark, and the only points that they got was on one made Marquise free throw. So just one of those deals where you can't have it, and like was been brought up so many times and will continue to be talked about this. That also happens when Keontae Johnson is off the floor for some of that, and where does Marquise Noel go to? Like, he either has to shoot it or somebody has to be in perfect position for him, and nobody was. The offense got really stale, didn't look very fluid during that stretch, which is odd because once you go up by 6 points, like, that's when it maybe should start to look a little bit more like that and take a few more chances. It just felt like the chances K-State took when they got a large enough lead in this game were in transition, and they were just really dumb decisions. Like, there's no other way to describe them other than just saying they were dumb decisions.
Yeah, I'm trying to look in the game log for the where was it? There was a moment where K-State had Naquan had an offensive rebound, and then he just whiffed a layup. And I think that was a part of the run, if I'm not mistaken. But I thought it was super odd how stagnant it got, because the one thing you can say about K-State this year, well, I mean, I guess the half court offense has gotten poor at times. But like in this tournament, it typically has been pretty good. And they just had such a long stretch of time where it felt like FAU made them spend so much time in the first 20 seconds of the shot clock just to get the ball into Marquise's hands. And then he would try to do something and set up somebody, but whoever was getting the ball was getting it in a position where they had no time to do anything with it. And when the rest of K-State's roster that is not Marquise Noel is getting the ball with very little time to create something, it doesn't typically go well when the defense knows that this guy has no option other than to shoot the ball. That doesn't go well for anybody other than maybe Keontae Johnson at times, and like Desi Sills when things are going really, really well. I think that after you saw how good of a performance you got from Ish Massoud on Thursday night, there could have been more opportunities to get him the ball in catch and shoot opportunities. Like he caught the ball multiple times tonight and put it on the deck and then shot a mid-range jumper. And not to be like Nate Oates or whatever of like never shoot a two. Like, you can shoot mid-range jumpers if you're good at them. Marquise Noel is pretty decent. Keontae Johnson is actually well above average at doing so. Ish Massoud is not the guy you want going to dribble pull up. So that part, there's always inexplicable things about March losses, whoever school you're rooting for. And there certainly were those today.
Yeah, I think that's probably, it would be lower on the list of what people would come to look at and everything else. But one of the what ifs, or how does that happens in this game, is Ish Massoud only getting 2 shots off from 3. The fact that now part of that, he only plays 14 minutes. He wasn't as good defensively tonight, and K-State felt like they couldn't have him in because they weren't rebounding the basketball. So that's where part of that stems from. But if you made the effort to get him the ball more, he gets those looks a little bit more. Then you can stomach having him in on defense because you have the opportunity and the possibility of him really helping you out on offense in a game where you obviously needed offense to come through and happen for you. So that's one of those where you just kind of feel like, I don't know what you needed to do there, but certainly more shots for Ish could have helped K-State in this game. Another thing that stood out to me was towards the later part of the first half, we got a lineup on the floor for K-State that involved Bebe and Tyke Green at the same time, which was just evidence to me that Jerome Tang was very much aware that his defense was playing poorly in the first half, and he was trying whatever he could to try to get any traction with defense, physicality, rebounding, And I mean, it worked in some ways. Bebe gave a good 5 minutes tonight, ultimately, I would say. But it's just an indication like neither of those guys played significant minutes in really the first 3 games of the tournament. Like even against Montana State. And so to be trying that in an Elite Eight in the first half, that was pretty telling of he wasn't thrilled with how things went for his team in the first half. And that's really where K-State lost this game. Like they had their chance. They built the lead in the second half. K-State lost this game because of the first half, because they weren't defending well enough and they were shooting themselves in the foot by ultimately not doing the little things the way that they were supposed to.
I just think that the first half ended up being a wash because while you can say that K-State didn't do the little things well in the first half, Florida Atlantic can also be like, we turned the ball over so freaking often. I think they had either 10 or 12 in the first half.
12 in the first half, 10 in the second half.
Okay, there you go. I would just say that they lost it with the half court offense stalling out. I think the effort to try to play Bebe and Tyke Green was more to do with Jerome Tang knew that his defense wasn't playing great. And when his defense doesn't play great, they are very susceptible to getting beat on the dribble and fouling. And getting beat on the dribble and fouling being the bailout for Keontae Johnson was a bad thing with 2 fouls. So I think that it had a lot to do with that rather than we're searching for an answer. Let's muck the game up, because K-State never wanted to muck this game up. They wanted to play in transition. They wanted to make it a game of skill. And ultimately the reason it couldn't, ultimately what did them in was FAU kind of mucking it up and slowing the game down and forcing them to run some half court offense. And I thought, if you're going to give some flowers to the opponent, an incredible job by FAU's coaching staff to figure things out late and to, as they got the lead early, they made Marquise Noel a shooter, not a passer. And I know that he got a couple early assists, but those early assists were because Naquan Tomlin hit a catch and shoot 3, which isn't a typical thing. And those were contested looks, but I think Marquise started 1 for 5, and it was 2 forced threes late in the shot clock. And it was those weird, confusing mid-range floaters where he's definitely driving, looking to pass, and then no one ends up open and he kind of ends up going up for it and he has to shoot it. And those are not his best shot. So I thought it was a really good coaching job by FAU. Dusty May is probably not going to be there very long. He will probably be moving up pretty soon. But Dusty
May will see at Texas Tech next year.
I mean, maybe.
I think they seem locked in on Grant McCasland. Yeah, they're locked in on McCasland.
But really solid job by him. I'm just bummed. I just still keep coming back to Marquise never looking at the rim, coming across half court.
Yeah, on back-to-back possessions to not take the 3. It makes sense. It's a smart enough play, and it doesn't kill you that he hits the pass to Tomlin. But you can have the hindsight of it and say, well, he probably should have shot it because you don't get a shot off later. I'm okay in those moments, letting, if my best shooter or my best player, he gets a look, take it when you get the look. Don't just, assume that you're going to get it later. Especially because this isn't the NBA. In the NBA, you can get the quick 2 for as long as you want in the late game situation, because every single guy out on the floor is an elite shot maker to some extent. Now it's relative in the NBA, but any one of those guys on the floor in crunch time can hit the 3. K-State's issue is on the floor and at the end of the game, what it ends up being Marquise-ish, Naquan, and then I'd have to go back and look to confirm who else it was. I would assume that it would have been Cam Carter and Desi Sills out there. Out of those guys, there are 2 of them that you trust shooting a 3-point shot on a regular basis, and that's Marquise and Ish. So it hurts to not have Keontae out there, who was just around 40%. Another question that I'll throw your way, this has a right answer. K-State had 2 players with positive plus minuses tonight. And look, plus minus can be a very flawed stat, but it sometimes can just be a pretty blunt way of saying, hey, you actually did good things when these guys were on the floor. And so maybe you should have had them out there. Can you tell me who the two guys for K-State with a positive plus minus were tonight?
Considering that Marquise Noel played all 40 minutes, it can't be him.
It cannot be him, correct?
Even though, and that's why plus minus is flawed, because you come away being like, man, Marquise Noel was a -3. And it's like, well, he played the entire game and the rest of his teammates didn't do enough to win. So he's a -3. That's why plus minus is flawed. Man. Should I be overthinking this?
No, you shouldn't overthink this.
I'm going to say that they were positive when Keontae was out there.
They were +4 when Keontae Johnson was on the floor in his 18 minutes tonight.
Okay. And then I'm going to say that in the very, very brief moments that he was on the floor, Bebe was a plus.
No, that you overthought it there.
Okay.
Bebe was -4. Desi actually had the worst plus minus tonight, -6 for Desi, which means Desi played 39 of 40 minutes, which means that somewhere in that aftermath, the 39 minutes that he was on the floor, that he gave up, there were more points that were scored by FAU. So K-State in the 1 minute that he was off the floor was probably pretty positive. Right? You'd have to go back and find the stretch where he wasn't on the floor. But unfortunately, that's another thing where I didn't think Desi Sills was bad tonight. He gave him 9 points. He was efficient in doing it. He even hit a 3 in the game, whatever. He didn't turn it over. So Desi doesn't get it. The other one is Ish Massoud. Ish Massoud was +3 in his 14 minutes on the floor this evening.
And let me just say this. That's a flaw in plus minus, because guess what? Ish Massoud was a negative on defense, and he was getting absolutely worked offensively by Golden. He was in the wrong position. When he was even somewhat in the right position, Golden was just going through him and scoring. There was no answer for him, and he wasn't taking away the pass. He wasn't taking away the score. Golden was so good early on of taking advantage of that matchup, and I don't know. That's one of those. It was one of the rare spots where you don't play a lot of big guys in the Big 12. There's not a ton of 7-footers taking advantage of anything, and so that never really showed up it showed up as a negative for K-State. The one night in Ames where Oshuni was going to work, and Alec asked Tang about what can you do to guard interiorly, and he was like, well, we might have to, collapse things in, and that might make us more susceptible to threes. And then I think that they did that, and eventually they were like, well, we're probably probably better off just guarding the 3-point line decently and hoping that average Big 12 bigs don't beat us. And then they finally got in the tournament a big who was somewhat skilled and was able to take advantage of things. Cause Maddie
who
Sissoko,
ironically was a Big 12 big at one point.
Exactly. But Maddie Sissoko is not a skilled big. Oscar Sheboy is not a skilled big.
And he's he is a thick, well-built dude, but he's undersized. He didn't have the towering height that Golden did. If you looked at Oscar Sheboy on the floor, you'd have a tough time finding him at first because he just kind of blends in with everybody else on Kentucky's roster height-wise. You have to oh, I see his face. That is Oscar Sheboy. So yeah, that to me is what stands out as K-State. You just don't face a ton of dudes like that. And that's the other thing with a roster that gets thrown together in this situation. If you think about a lot of the Baylor teams that Jerome Tang was an assistant coach for, they eventually had some bigger guys inside that you could kind of throw that way and be more, prepared for. When you're throwing a team together on the fly, and really, that building came in the last 2 months of the summer for this team, you're going to have some holes in some areas. And ultimately, it's a matter of, are you trying to do what gives you the best chance to compete in the regular season? Or are you trying to do what, if you get to March, it gives you the best chance of success there? Because theoretically, I'm sure Jerome Tang could have gone and found some 7-foot dudes in the portal if he wanted to. But those guys would not have been of any service in games in the Big 12 against Kansas or Baylor or whoever else, like you just wouldn't have had that. So it's unfortunate. Like you run into that, and that element adds a not so great matchup for K-State, because then the guy with your most length is Naquan Tomlin, and like Naquan Tomlin just isn't like physically strong enough to handle a guy like Golden, who is just, he's not only tall, but he is a well-built individual, and that made it really tough for him.
Yeah, it showed that K-State's best or K-State's number one go-to option in terms of guarding the post whenever they had someone who was more physical than them was typically to just front the guy, and Ish Masood could not front Golden very well in that situation. But I keep thinking about the fact that you go 10 for 20. Like you tell me K-State was going to go 10 for 22. Marquise Noel was going to shoot 5 for 11 from 3 and have 12 assists. Like if you told me just Marquise Noel goes 5 for 11 from 3, he has 12 assists, guess the score, I would have said K-State by 15.
Mm-hmm.
That part is not even knowing that he scores 30 points, but that part just is so confusing to me. And I think it's, and to the previous point of like, do you coach your team to be best in March, or do you coach your team to win, to like what is going to win you league games? I don't think that Jerome Tang had the advantage of coaching his team for what is best in March.
Yeah.
Because this team was always in overachieve mode and always in let's take advantage of this season while we have it mode. And they had no reason to think that they were going. I know that the story came out that at some point earlier this season, Marquise Noel started like breaking down huddles at practice with national champs, and Tang was like, okay, I guess we're going with that. I think that was in like a CJ Moore feature.
Yeah.
But like this team wasn't supposed to be here today. So lost. I know we've gotten to 37 minutes and 38 seconds on the stream.
Yeah.
But now is the moment where we can maybe admits to a moral victory and what is, as we talked about on Thursday night, in the top 5 percentile range of outcomes for this season and this group and this roster construction, and like overall just a really successful year for K-State.
Yeah, I think in the end that we'll dive into the big picture reflection stuff, because this team deserves that more than, 37 minutes of criticism for a loss that they played their butts off in. They had their star player, one of the best players in the country, play like that. And some, I mean, the refs did not lose K-State this game. The refs didn't play a huge role in this game, but they had some bad whistles and bad moments that just weren't advantageous to K-State. Like if
they also fouled out Greenlee.
Yeah, they did. They did in the end. And he got fouled out on kind of a BS one too at the end, where he's diving for a loose ball. This is one of those that like I follow him on Twitter, and the day after games they go through. If you follow like umpire scorecards on Twitter, and they go through and they go, say the Royals played the Reds. The Reds got plus 0.76 runs because of these calls that went in their favor. And it'll show like these 3 pitches were the worst, like on a 1-2 count, instead of this being called strike 3 like it should have been, it was called ball 2. On this 3-0 count, strike 1 was called ball 4. Like it goes through and it equates that. And if you did that for this game and there was a way to measure that in basketball, you would look at, I guess I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. You would look at the ferocity of the fouls that were committed, and you would look at K-State's and go, those were a tad weak. Like the Gasson one at the end that he fouls out on looks like a foul, but the FAU guy's tightrope in the sideline, he's already kind of leaning, and that's a tough one. And so I think that's where you look at this and go, okay, K-State did have, like, it didn't go their way, but they lost this game themselves. But on the reflection side, and I'll say one thing on it that's not positive, and then we can dive into the positives here. The one negative is in a lot of other circumstances, at the end of the season, and you get to this point with all the other things that led to this, like first year head coach, you didn't know what it was going to be like. You only had 2 guys on the roster from last year. Um, all these different things. The one thing at the end of the day that stings, and this ties into everything else, and this is why it's tough to have that, moral victory type thing, is you lost to Florida Atlantic in the Elite Eight. Like, yes, K-State at the start of the year should not have been in the Elite Eight. They should not have been a couple of buckets away from the Final Four this year. Absolutely should not have been. But they got to this point, and it's just Florida freaking Atlantic that you got to get past. Just like in 2018, where, hey, that's a good building year. You made the NCAA tournament in 2017, 2018. Look at that. 9 seed. Hey, you won a game. You lucked into it. You got to a second weekend. That's big experience. Holy crap. Just beat Kentucky in the Sweet 16. Like, that was a crazy game. And now all you have to do is beat Loyola to go to the Final Four. Like, yeah, sign me up. And then, the Butler one we talked about is a little bit different, but that one's still like, it's one of those deals where it's tough to have that moral victory feeling when you lose to a team that you should beat more times than not. And Florida Atlantic is very good. A lot of people went to it on Twitter, like they're 34-3 now. Like, you don't win that many games on accident. At some point, winning 34 out of 37 games in the season is advantageous to you. Like, Florida Atlantic knew how to win more games at the end than K-State did. And that's just a fact because they had more wins. But it is tough. And that's the one thing where, like, I'll give people credit if they don't want to do the moral victory thing right now, because it was Florida Atlantic. And again, it's a K-State loss to a mid-major team that you should beat to get to the Final Four. And now next year you're going on 60 years without a Final Four appearance at a program that has been to like the 6th or 7th most Elite Eights in the entire college basketball world. Yet you've only been to 4 Final Fours, and the last one was before, we really start to now, like, the expiration date has come and gone for those Final Fours to really, like, mean something in the grand scheme of things of basketball right now. Like, K-State is not getting credit for those Final Fours from anybody under the age of 40 right now. And for anybody, like, it's like Nebraska football. Nebraska, hey, congrats. You were awesome in the 80s and 90s. 18-year-old kids do not give a shit right now about what you did in the 80s and 90s because you have been really bad. Now, K-State basketball has been better than Nebraska football since their heydays ended in both sides. But that's the tough part about it and everything else. Now, sliding into the big picture, moral victory, whatever you want to call it, this was an incredible first year for K-State basketball in so many different ways. It highlights just how big time of a move it was for Gene Taylor to get Jerome Tang. And I think the best part about it is it doesn't feel like it's a fluke. It doesn't feel like it was just K-State putting it together and, oh, hey, look at this. We're in the NCAA tournament. Oh, look, we're in the Elite Eight. Like, they were a 3 seed. They finished 3rd in the toughest basketball conference in the country, and it's the toughest basketball conference we've seen in a long, long time. Like, you don't end up there by accident. And it's only, I think next year there will probably be a little bit of a drop-off because you lose a lot of guys again. You lose 3 of your 4 best players in Keontae, Marquise, and Desi Sills. And there's going to be a lot of building and relying on different guys. But this thing is built for the future now. And you can see that everything that Jerome Tang learned in his almost 2 decades in Waco is something that he's going to be able to translate to K-State. And if he can do this with a hodgepodge roster in just less than a year, I'm excited to see what you can do when you actually get your full talent with you, where you get multiple recruiting classes in. You've been able to establish yourself more. And I think K-State is going to be a hot destination in the portal now because they went on this run. They have the Keontae Johnson story they can sell, and they've got coaches and a personality everywhere on this roster that people want to be a part of. There was a 5-star kid that they're recruiting that was in attendance at Madison Square Garden tonight that he just wanted to come watch K-State in the Elite Eight. That is a big deal. And that's the kind of stuff that this staff is going to be able to do. So that to me is the most beautiful thing about it. And that should not be lost, should not be forgotten. This team should be appreciated for everything they did. It sucks that I'm not even going to say that they weren't able to get it done, that they lost this game, that K-State didn't win this game. That's the fair way of putting it, because, there's the old saying about, K-State didn't lose, Florida Atlantic won it, whatever. Florida Atlantic won that game by doing things a little bit better than K-State tonight. K-State, unfortunately, the time was up on Keontae Johnson to have a game with foul trouble, and he fouls out. It's tough luck. But at the end of the day, you'll be able to look back. It was an awesome season, and it was a great way to set the foundation and get people ready for what the Jerome Tang era will hopefully be like for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense at the end of the day that the way K-State loses is massively getting out rebounded and Keontae Johnson having foul trouble. Like, at the end of the day, those are the two things. Those are the two things that make the most sense. In that sense, it's not inexplicable. It is inexplicable, and it's unbelievably frustrating. But if they were going to lose, that is what you would have expected that they lose because of. I will say, from the to rag on and maybe hit on the point of, like, you just had to beat Florida Atlantic. You also only would have had to beat Creighton or San Diego State. Like, not teams that have high pedigree to play in the national championship game.
Against possibly Texas, who you already beat and should have beaten the second time.
Yeah, which I think now Florida Atlantic's in the Final Four. You're getting Creighton or San Diego State. Like, it's going to be a weird tournament. You know what's going to happen? UConn's going to win the title. And I know that this game is happening right now as we speak.
Yeah.
That's probably, like, my end thought at the end of the night is just like, weird tournament. All right, let's hand the trophy to UConn. Because that's probably what is going to happen, and is what has happened every time that there's been an outlier tournament.
Sure. Yeah, UConn just wins it.
So that's kind of the overarching thought in that sense. But yeah, I mean, work is cut out for Jerome. Like, that's the crappy part is he's in the portal tomorrow. There's no time for him to mourn the loss of Noel and Johnson and all of the guys that have to move on. But you've got good young guards coming in. You don't typically win with good young guards in the Big 12 without having an old one to kind of usher them along. So you need to find an old guard. You need to find a scoring wing that replaces Keontae. And then I think that the hope is just that Naquan steps forward, and then Taj Manning and Jarrell Colbert step up, and then you've got a formidable front court. But, like, unless we've been sold a bag of fake goods, Taj Manning is supposed to be a stud. So
yeah, I mean, there have been rave reviews about Taj Manning and what he can do, and we'll see what ends up coming out of it. That's the tough part, and I said it I somewhere along the way, middle of the year, and I really do believe it. If people remember how things went down, and I'm sure they do, 2008 was a lot different. It had a lot of the same feelings because of the personnel, but not the team success. 2008, Frank Martin's first year, NCAA tournament, they beat USC in the first round. But very similar to this team, they had guys that were only going to be here for one season. I mean, technically, Bill Walker was here for a season and a half, but Michael Beasley was obviously not coming back. Bill Walker was not coming back. You also lost an experienced guard on that team in Clint Stewart, who was a senior and was graduating. Like, that team lost a lot. And in 2009, the foundational pieces were there on that roster. It was the first season of Jacob Pullen and Denny Clemente together, but Pullen was a sophomore, and he didn't have extreme, once-in-a-lifetime talent around him, and there was some stuff that they had to learn about. Now, their resume, you could argue they should have been in the field in 2009, just like you could have in 2007, but they didn't make it to the NCAA tournament. They went to the NIT in 2009. And then in 2010, they're back. They go on their run, and that's the one thing, and I don't want to be like negative right now, which is exactly what this sounds like, is being like, hey, get ready for the NIT run next March. But just like people need to be prepared for that, that even though this thing could keep building, year two is going to be, in some ways, now that knowing what we know, year two might be tougher for Jerome Tang than year one was, because Marquise Noel, maybe it was a good thing that he didn't have any teammates this summer, and the only thing that he could do is bust his ass in the gym and become a better shooter than he was ever before. And I guess he must have just like fantasized and dreamed in his head about passing to teammates, because his passing went to just a brand new level and everything else. Like there's just so much that K-State was fortunate for this year. The Keontae Johnson thing ends up working out in their favor. And like none of this stuff is like accidental, but it is one of those deals where year one went as perfectly, almost as perfectly as it could have gone for K-State. I think we said this the other day. Like if you went through and you went through and you were like, okay, you run the simulation 1,000 times, what outcome is the best for K-State? This is like literally number 3 on the outcome list of best things that could have happened, because now we know that there are simulations out there that K-State beats Florida Atlantic, they beat Creighton or San Diego State, and then they get to play Texas another time, and they're able to beat Texas a second time, and they're national champions. That's number 1. Number 2 is you just beat Florida Atlantic, and you get there. But number 3 is you finish third in the toughest Big 12 that we've ever seen. You have an emotional, amazing home victory against Kansas in overtime that is the puff your chest out moment, say, we've arrived, we are here, this is the real deal. And you have this fun season that you go on this Elite Eight run where you handled a force in Oscar Tshiebwe and you hit big-time shots in that game. You have another all-time, overtime-bound Elite Eight, Sweet 16 game against Michigan State. And you get to the Elite Eight, and it was another heck of a game. But now K-State knows what it's like to be on the opposite end of one of those great NCAA tournament games, but you're the loser. Like 2010 didn't happen against Xavier. 2018 didn't happen against Kentucky. This tournament didn't happen against Kentucky. Didn't happen against Michigan State. You just got bit by it in the end by Florida Atlantic. After the game, Jerome Tang, a quote that he had at his podium, he said, if we can't be grateful in these times, then all the love and joy we talk about is fraud, and we're not frauds. That's Jerome Tang's quote after the game. And again, there's his full press conference we'll have up on the site later today, as well as all the breakout sessions. And that's another thing to take into consideration is, to me, like this K-State team was a legitimately good basketball team, and everything that happened this year wasn't fraudulent, and they earned it. Like if you look at teams that had the paths that they did in this tournament, like K-State was about the only one that played the conventional path in their tournament. Them in Texas. Texas is the only one that has played a conventional path to this point in time. And K-State earned it in those 2 really tough games against Kentucky and Michigan State.
Yeah, I have not been able to hear everything that was said post-game. I'm just scrolling through Twitter and seeing reaction, a lot of the stuff from the local guys, especially at least my coworkers at KCTV. But I will just say I'm a lot more impressed by the way that Jerome Tang has handled losing than I am by John Calipari and Tom Izzo. That speaks volumes. And overall, that's a very positive thing to say. The quote that you even read was part of his like minute-long opening statement. So I'm sure that there was other good stuff in there. But K-State continues to win the press conference even while losing.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's ironic because there were a lot of non-K-State fans that were laughing at Jerome Tang winning the press conference on day one, and here we are, close to 365 days later, and Jerome Tang has still won the press conference. Actually, I don't know, yesterday or sometime in the next couple of days is going to be the full year anniversary since the opening press conference for Jerome Tang.
It was a
at
couple
K-State.
days ago.
Yeah, so I know that like a week ago or 6 days ago or whatever is like the anniversary of like the news came out, and then the introduction sometime around here. So I don't know. It's going to be fun to follow K-State basketball. It's certainly back, and that's a good thing, because that's the other thing that needs to be talked about here in the reflection of all this is that Jerome Tang, he didn't need to go to an Elite Eight. He didn't need to win 11 or 12 Big 12 games there this year, 26 games. He didn't have to do all that to do what he did with the fan base, because he brought K-State fans all the way back on board for basketball, which it was impressive to do in a one-year stretch where it was just so down and people did not care and they were content with losing because it was time for a change. Like, you have a coach around for a decade and they've only won in 5 of those 10 seasons. It becomes time for a change, and that's ultimately what happened there. And for him to get the fan base 100% bought back in to where even it was, before the Kansas game, he had Bramlage pretty darn full for a game against Oklahoma State early in conference play. He had that game after KU, a Saturday where the Chiefs were playing against Texas Tech. He had Bramlage full, and other various games, and they fought through unfortunate moments early in the year where the Wichita State game is a Saturday night and everybody's in Dallas celebrating a Big 12 football championship. And then the opener for Big 12 play is against West Virginia and everybody's in New Orleans at the Sugar Bowl with K-State football. And then everybody was there and they were locked in, and K-State basketball became fun again. And it feels like it's going to be really fun for a really long time to come. And that's another thing that Jerome Tang and his entire staff deserves a lot of credit for.
Very much so. I keep going through the box score to look at a couple other things, and I will just say only 2 scorers in double figures. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I know that the key number for K-State all season, Keontae had 9, Desi had 9, so a couple guys close to double figures. And I think Tom Gilbert, K-State's SID, has always kind of put an emphasis, at least in postgame, and mentioning to us K-State's record, I believe, when they have 4 in double figures. I mean, that's typically a really good barometer for most teams. Yeah. But FAU had 4 in double figures. So that is one of those things where you just probably wish you could have gotten. And I think Desi had all 9 in the first half. So you just needed a third or a fourth to step up. And when the third is your best player or your second best player, one of your All-Americans sitting on the bench, that is certainly less.
This is one of those scenarios. Back into some game reflection real quick, because you brought it up, and then we'll dive into some individual stuff and then be done for the night. Is you look at how it plays out, and K-State needed the game that they had against Michigan State to beat Michigan State, because Michigan State had a game worthy of them getting a win in that moment. And K-State had 6 guys in double figures, I think, Thursday night, and they just got great performances all around for a team that, as we know, only has 2 dudes that are bucket getters, essentially, in Keontae and Marquise, and then some other guys that can rise up, but they're also sometimes going to be really quiet. And for Florida Atlantic, this is where the draw kind of worked out. They play a Tennessee team without their best player, who also isn't like a dynamite offensive team. And Florida Atlantic, even though they got some looks, like they didn't need their all-world game to happen against Tennessee. And they were essentially due for one. They had not shot to their level in this tournament. And they get into this game with K-State where they had their game where guys just played at a different level that they normally don't. Like Greenlee tonight ends up with 16, and he's 4 of 6 from 3. Brian Greenlee on the season averages 7.1 points per game. And so like normally that's not the type of game that you're going to get out of him. It's just not. And unfortunately it bit K-State tonight. Greenlee only had 3 other games this season with 14 points or more. He had 14 against Bryant, 23 against Eastern Michigan, and 19 against Rice. So tonight, him going off for what he did is a little bit different. And then in addition to that, he only had like 3 or 4 other games where he was in double figures this year. So Florida Atlantic, like they just had their game where other guys stepped up, made their plays, And K-State tonight had the total opposite where, like you're saying, Marquise is the only other one in double figures with Naquan Tomlin. And the fact that you weren't able to get one of your normal pieces like Keontae to that mark, because another Keontae basket, essentially, that is what the difference is in this game. Now, Keontae had chances to make up for it. His 0 of 3 at the free throw line hurts. And K-State missing free throws is going to sting. But Florida Atlantic, they played a game that their stars played like stars, and they got the boost they needed from somebody that normally doesn't step up. And unfortunately for K-State, one star played like a star. The other couldn't be on the floor long enough to showcase himself playing like a star, and nobody else had that special game left in the tank tonight, and that's what did K-State in. So just unfortunate, and one of those deals where maybe K-State genuinely would have been better off playing a team like Tennessee, which also seems to make sense because Florida Atlantic beat them in the Sweet 16. So if you could lose in the Sweet 16 like they did at Florida Atlantic, we're probably right in saying that Tennessee would have been a better game for K-State to have seen here, because K-State scored 76 points tonight. I don't think Tennessee was going to score 76 points tonight.
Yeah. Man. I thought that I had my bracket pre-East region was Memphis, K-State, Elite Eight. And FAU like barely got by Memphis. I would say got the benefit of a good whistle.
Well, they trailed late against Fairleigh Dickinson too.
Yeah. But they got the benefit of a very good whistle at the end of the Memphis game. And I'm certainly not bitter at all, aside from thinking that I would have nailed the exact Elite Eight, aside from that.
Yeah.
And I think that Kendrick Davis versus Marquise Noel would have been better off for K-State than this collective unit of like, I don't even know, like coaches are so good at game plans and scouting reports and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, there's got to be a little bit of value to just like knowing teams, knowing who dudes are. And just like collectively, I think K-State probably would have known a little bit more about Tennessee than FAU.
Well,
and you never want to see the team that is so accustomed to winning, because late in games, they will almost always do the right thing, because I understand the Ken Palm situation. And when you win so many games and you win so many close games, your luck rating is going to be higher, because the law of large averages is just going to say you're probably not supposed to do such a thing. But at the same time, and this is where I think it was fascinating with Jerome Tang and the way that he coached the end of the game, because we haven't really, like, K-State has ended up on the positive side of most 5-point or less games. The way that after they got what I think it was when they got down 1 on the Cam Carter 3, they called a timeout. Was that the last timeout? And
that was the last timeout. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's an example of like, you're down 1, 75-74 with how many seconds were left at that point? Let me look.
Like 8 point something is what it was.
75-74. 75-74 was the second to last timeout. 24 seconds left. The last timeout comes after Tomlin makes the layup at 8 seconds left.
That's right. Yeah.
In that situation, I don't know how you feel about this. That's not a situation where I'm setting up a timeout, because you allow the offense to get themselves set up as well. And you're in a spot where you're fouling regardless. So I don't know. That was the only thing I thought was unique, is we really haven't seen much of what Jerome Tang does in late game situations when K-State's losing. Most of the time in the late game situations, it felt like they were winning this year, and they were playing from ahead. And in this situation, they kind of had their backs against the wall, and we hadn't seen that. And it was interesting to see that was the way that it was, I guess, attacked from their perspective.
Yeah, and I need to go back and look here at the end just to check on just to make sure that I'm correct in what I think the situation was. Well, hang on, let me go and see if I can find the exact spot that I need. I'm trying to see. So yeah, Florida Atlantic they end the game with 3 timeouts. They did not use a timeout in the second half. So that includes them getting down by 7 points and then the comeback and then late game situations. They didn't have to use one of their timeouts at all. And I'm with you. To me, it doesn't make a ton of sense with 7 point whatever on the clock, 8 point whatever, to use a timeout when hey, try and foul. Let's, maybe they're a little, on edge right now. Like, let's not give a chance to calm them down. I'm with you on that. The other part, you were talking about like playing Tennessee, maybe it helps. I think it's beneficial when you go into a game and you know who your biggest enemy is. I think it's a lot tougher when you go into a game like against Florida Atlantic where they don't have any guys that are averaging numbers that would hit you over the head. It's just a lot more balanced. And so when there are a lot more enemies that are out there that you have to worry about, especially with a team like K-State that was thrown together so quickly and everything else, you weren't able to build out like a true full roster. And you know that you have deficiencies in some areas. It's really tough. Like, one of the reasons why that they were able to handle a team like Kansas at home this year is those ancillary pieces had a chance and showed a lot of times that they could disappear for Kansas. And so it was, you really only have to worry about Jalen Wilson. And if he gets his, whatever, and he did get his in that game, but you know that, hey, let's just lock down everybody else. You can let somebody do it. With Florida Atlantic, you just didn't know who that guy was to let get it. And you also couldn't give anybody else an open look anywhere. So I think it's beneficial at times to play a team that has one common enemy or the guy that as opposed to whatever else it may be. So I don't know. Just very, very tough to see how things ended up working out. So we'll see how things turn for K-State. And like you said, like the portal, Jerome Tang's going to have to be in it tomorrow because that's the other thing. Like, guys have already been able to work the portal if they're not playing, which is kind of a crazy thing. Individually for this season, obviously Keontae Johnson makes a pretty big impact for his one season in Manhattan. Marquise Noel has a massive impact for his 2 seasons in Manhattan, mainly for bridging the gap between Bruce Weber and Jerome Tang. And the fact that he put in the work to improve himself to this level this year is very impressive. But his voice being the guy that stood up and was like, I'm staying with Jerome Tang and helping lead and guide guys that got here then and joined in is a very big deal. And there are some guys that have, I won't throw Beasley in this because it was a one and done type situation, but there are some guys out there that their impact in just a couple of years at K-State, there's not many guys that are going to top Marquise Noel. Mitch Richmond is the only one that immediately comes to my mind that you can say he was at K-State for 2 years, had an awesome career. He was a part of tournament teams and everything. Like, Mitch Richmond is probably still ahead of Marquise Noel. But Marquise Noel is right up there. Denny Clemente was here for 2 seasons. So there are some other guys out there, but you can't say enough good things about Marquise Noel and what he did. And that's a dude that even in a loss, K-State fans should be proud that he was a Wildcat and that one of the best players in college basketball this year played on your team. 2 of them did. Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel being All-Americans this year. That's something to be prideful about, even, when things feel as crappy as they do right
now. Here's where I would say that there was an outlier statistic as I was going through college basketball reference and some game logs.
Mm-hmm.
K-State to this point of the season was undefeated in games where they had 12 turnovers or fewer.
Yep.
And they only had 12 tonight and lost.
Yeah.
And that's why the rebounding kills you, because you still took more shots than the Owls did. It was a 58-54 shot advantage for K-State because they forced so many turnovers and they didn't turn the ball over too many times. But when you get doubled up in rebounding 44-22, like you just, that kills you.
Yep. No, that's tough. I when you said that, I knew where you were going to be going with it and what it was going to be. So yeah, just tough for K-State there, and everything will move on. Any final thoughts from this season? I know there will be different writing pieces that we have done over next however long on the website, and probably something better and less in the moment later on down the road. But final thoughts before we wrap up tonight.
Retire Marquise Noel's jersey.
You can make a strong case for it. I mean, they
I
certainly
think
would if
at
he
a,
played.
I,
They certainly
I
would if he
mean,
played for KU.
well, yeah, I was gonna say I know that the criteria at KU is if you are an All-American, you get your jersey retired, and I would just say that at K-State, given the fact that there's been a lot fewer All-Americans
A few
historically.
less All-Americans.
Yeah, I would say at any program, if you go an All-American season, your jersey should get hung up in the rafters. If you're one of the 15 best players in the sport that year, you should get it. So I would clamor for that, considering just a record-breaking season for assists in school history, second nationally in assists per game, because I think Marquise Noel's tournament might have even passed him up on Yuri Collins from a per game standpoint, but certainly maybe from a total assist standpoint as well. But yeah, I just that's what I would stand over that and be like, when crazy stuff like that happens and you have these memorable performances, like, you should do the correct thing in honoring them. And that means I know that logistically there has been issues with getting Pullen his jersey retired. And I know that there's probably people who are like, Michael Beasley wasn't there long enough. But
those people are idiots. That's my take on it. I just want people to know that, like, Beasley should absolutely be in the rafters. Like, he was
1,000%.
He was the linchpin to K-State basketball becoming K-State basketball again. So yeah.
Correct. So wonderful year from Marquise, and I know that he was only there for 2 years, but he just put it up there. Just put it up there. Do the right thing and find a way to remember your great players the way that they are supposed to be remembered. And I'm bummed that we don't get K-State Creighton, because I think Creighton's going to win tomorrow, and I think that would have been a freaking unbelievable Final Four game. Yeah, that's like, I understand Florida Atlantic's a great team. I don't think that they're a fun watch.
I would agree with that. Yes. So this is just to note and everything. Mitch Richmond he has his jersey retired, and he only played at K-State for 2 seasons. Mitch Richmond in his career at K-State averaged 20.7 points a game. He ended up with 6 rebounds a game and 3.2 assists a game. And the difference being for Mitch Richmond is he played in the 80s. He was on that team that lost to KU in the Elite Eight, which, by the way, during my halftime research, that is the last time K-State led an Elite Eight game at halftime, was the 1988 Elite Eight against KU that they ultimately lost. Marquise Noel's impact on K-State is going to be so much more than him being an All-American and the numbers he put up. Like, that contributes to what he's about. But like what I was saying, like, him bridging the gap and being the guy that from day one's going to be associated with Jerome Tang and what started this all back up for K-State is such a significant deal, that there's not only hey, you had the numbers to back it up, but you had such a significance to this team and this program that you deserve some recognition in that way. Like, let me equate this to something. It is officially baseball season for me. My consolation that we won't be in Houston is that I at least get to go to opening day on Thursday, and share that beautiful moment with my wife. Nothing I love more than opening day. I probably would have loved the Final Four a little bit more, but never seen my school go to one of those, so I don't know what that's like. I'm not an Alex Gordon guy. I think he was a waste of money, overrated, overhyped. Just another product of Dayton Moore being bad at his job. But Alex Gordon was a great guy on great teams with one hell of a moment in game 1 of the 2015 World Series that set that thing on the course of the Royals winning it all. And so Alex Gordon, baseball, you actually retire the number. People can wear the number 4 for the rest of the Royals' existence. That's fine. I'm not upset about that. Alex Gordon deserves a statue or something for what he was a part of, being around as long as he was, and having that moment. And Marquise Noel, he deserves his jersey in the rafters. And I don't think that's hyperbole. I don't think that's just prisoner of the moment type stuff. He had an awesome 2-year career. He was a part of something really special with the birth of what Jerome Tang is building here. And he had an all-time NCAA tournament. Like you said at the start of the show, his tournament ends up being more Steph Curry than Kemba Walker. And for people that don't understand that reference, Steph Curry's his ended in the Elite Eight against Kansas in 2000.
It ended with him not getting a shot up and him giving the ball to a teammate.
Yes, very true.
Teammate actually did get a shot up, unlike Ish, but very similar endings as well.
And Kemba ends it in 2011 by taking Connecticut and winning the title against Butler. Screw those guys. So yeah, I just think like you can't understate how important Marquise Noel was to K-State, and the fact that not only was it that he was the first guy to step up and decide that he was staying here, but the fact that he was so vocal in his love and support of Jerome Tang from the second he got hired all the way to today when his career at K-State ended. It's so important to have your leader step up and do that. And it also helps when your leader does that and he's able to score 30 points in games for you and dish out a ton of assists. So there was another point on assists I was going to make, but it doesn't matter because we've wrapped it up and the game's over. K-State only had 14 assists today. 12 of the 14 came from Marquise. That's another telling point, is that K-State assisted on way under 50% of their made buckets tonight. Their magic number this year was 63% on assisted buckets. They were 23-0 in games where they assisted on 63% of their made field goals this year. So that is that, and that's a good hour 15 plus of everything. I'm probably done watching basketball for tonight. It's going to be really tough to watch tomorrow. I guess I need to go support my Lady Vols tonight. See what they do in the NCAA tournament. Go throw on the Rocky Top Soul shirt that I bought earlier this week in Knoxville with Alec, and support the girls as they try to get to the Final Four. But I'll probably watch the games next weekend, and I'll be rooting as hard as one can for the Aztecs or Blue Jays. And I do think it would be pretty ironic if we get to the end of the year, and as much as people want to talk about how weird and wacky this NCAA tournament was, if it's Creighton UConn in the national title, it's like, oh, that's a national title game that people could have seen happening, at the start of the season. Now UConn, I guess maybe they made their little burst, and that's what they needed to be seen for people to believe in them. But Creighton was like a top 5 team preseason, and they just didn't have things go their way.
Creighton UConn in the national championship game would have made perfect sense on Thanksgiving Day.
Yep.
And then you would have been like, you're taking freaking crazy pills if you think that Creighton and UConn are going to play in the title game on Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
And now you're here. So,
this is for people to answer. And if you're listening live, you can say it in the YouTube chat, or if you're listening on the podcast, you can tweet at me or something. Do we want Texas to win to prop the Big 12 up again?
As soon as you said it's going to be hard to watch basketball, I was as a good journalist putting away the question of, are you rooting for Pac or are you rooting for Texas tomorrow?
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Hook 'em. Yeah. I need Alec to put on his Longhorn shirt now.
I will say, I was there last night. Nigel Pack was freaking unbelievable against Houston.
Yeah, he maybe would have helped this team a game or two this year if he was still around.
Maybe tonight.
Yeah, maybe tonight to have. And that, again, something comes up, tie back into it. That's one of those things that for K-State, if you look at it, that's going to be the future, is they're going to have more than just 2 main scorers. And that's what happened on those Baylor teams that Jerome Tang was a part of. If you go and look at how things ended up working out for them, like they were able to come through and they were able to have X amount of players that were talented enough and able to contribute in some way that like you had reliable scoring options. Like if you go look at this season for Baylor, they had 4 guys that averaged in double figures. That's pretty good. I don't know that you're always going to get that if you're K-State. Last year, let's see what ends up being the number last year. They had 3 guys that averaged over 13 points a game, and then they had 3 guys that averaged close to 10 points a game on last year's team. Everybody knows about how great their guard play is. That's another thing that K-State can expect to have. The year that Baylor won the national title, they had 16.7 a game from Butler, 15.9 from Maceo Teague, and 14.0 from Davion Mitchell. And then they had 2 other guys that had 9 and 8 points a game. Like, that is what's going to be coming for K-State. And that's how this roster is going to be built. And that's why at the end of the day, you can for once in your life suck it up and be a moral victories guy if you're that tough guy out there. I don't like moral victories either because I'm like, yeah, it's a loss is a loss, whatever. But the fact that Jerome Tang was able to somehow cobble together 2 all-time players and get the effort out of them and scoring, and then put enough things and pieces around them to get an Elite 8 run and be a bounce or 2 away from a Final Four is really impressive and really telling about where the direction of this thing is going to go. And that's why if this team can go to an Elite 8, even though they had 2 All-Americans and everything from Keontae Johnson and Marquise Noel, that's why to me, like, we know that this is not a fluke, that this is the real deal, and this is what the expectation for K-State basketball is going to be moving forward. Like, this is not to tie it back in and, perfect bow and you go back to the expect to win line from Tang against Kansas, but genuinely, like, the expectation is going to be in the future what this season was. Like, Baylor people this year, as much as they're accustomed to painful losses in the tournament in past years, losing in the second round is not what Baylor basketball is now. Baylor basketball should be something more.
But my counterpoint to that would be, and this is very important, and I don't love telling people how to fan and how to enjoy your team personally, but college basketball is different than any other sport.
Yep.
Single elimination, way more fluky. I know that football is single elimination as well, but that game is a little.
If you're the better team in football, you're going to win 90% of the time.
Win. But I will say this: if Jerome Tang is what we think he is, if Jerome Tang has this program in the elite bows as what we think he is, he's going to have years like Baylor this year. He's going to have years like KU last year, maybe, where. And I would use these Big 12 programs and what KU and Baylor have done as an example. Mm-hmm. There is an art to, and the best way to have success in March, I guess Gonzaga tonight is a good example of this as well. The best way to have success in March is just to keep having as many chances as possible with really good teams. Yep. There will, if Tang is what we think he is, he's going to have years where he has a team that is probably better than this team in the regular season, gets a better seed, and guess what? They could lose in the round of 32. They could lose in the Sweet 16, and you could be like, failure. Didn't make the Elite 8, didn't make the Final Four. How did this K-State team make the Elite 8 and that team didn't? And over time, you kind of, unless you just get lucky and you hit it with one run and you Kevin Ollie that thing, like you need to just swing at the pinata, and I love that analogy as many times as possible, and just hope you hit it every once in a while. Or I mean, the worst analogy is just like you're kind of playing the lottery, but if you get a 1 or a 2 seed, you're playing like your local raffle where you have extra tickets is the best way of saying it. So if you're at the parent teacher council or whatever meeting and you've got 40% of the tickets, that's what a 1 or a 2 seed is, and that's what you're hoping for. So like, just keep stacking seasons of 1s and 2s and 3 seeds, and you've got a good chance. And it's super, super hard to do that, and that's what you should be striving for. But just remember, there may be years in the future where you have a better regular season, a worse postseason. There might be a year where you have a worse regular season, a better postseason. March is fickle. So who knows what's going to happen?
As I like to say, get the puck on net. Whoever gets more pucks on net in a hockey game, they're going to win 9 times out of 10. I don't know if that's really true, but I just know that's how it feels when I'm playing NHL on the PlayStation. So pucks on net, that's the most important thing.
Winning national titles, unless you are UConn in the NCAA tournament, unless you are UConn, winning a national title is ultimately just who can stack 1s and 2 seeds more often and give themselves more chances. And that's why KU and North Carolina have won a ton and Duke has won a ton.
That's a great point. And I think that's something it was so weird to me. I don't know who posted it, but it was some account. Yesterday, however many days ago, was the day that KU beat Duke in that 2018 Elite Eight game before they got smashed by Villanova, which the Big 12 had back to like a 3-year stretch where they had blown out teams in the Final Four. But prior to that game, I guess I knew it in the moment, but it's one of those things it's wild to look back on. So Bill Self was in his 15th season at Kansas, and he'd only been to 2 Final Fours since he was at KU. And that's like the best indicator of it. Of Kansas has been the most dominant team for the last 20 years in college basketball. They haven't missed an NCAA. Yeah, they haven't missed an NCAA tournament. They have had great players. They have one of the best coaches that the game has ever seen. And up until, however many years ago, like they went into an Elite Eight where Bill Self had lost a lot of games like that at KU. Now, he had the national championship that he got in his 5th year as head coach. That helps. But in 2 of his first 3 seasons, he lost in the first round with teams that won the Big 12 and that won close to 25 games. Like, that is another indicator of how wild it can be. And now Kansas is fortunate that in the last, they just had a 4-year stretch where in 4 tournaments, they went to 2 Final Fours and they won a national championship. And that's just the other indicator of, like what you're saying, in March, it's more about the opportunities that you get, the more appearances that you get, as opposed to, just how good one team is. And that's the thing that will need people to have like some of that levity and understanding of what it's going to be. But I do think like the expectation becomes good seeds in the NCAA tournament, and you're going to become one of those teams that you get those consistent chances to prove yourself and be in the tournament. And the other thing that helps you is like, we're going to compare this thing to Baylor a lot, not only this year, not only next year, but over the next however many years that Jerome Tang is here. Be thankful that if you're K-State, you get to start on a lot more solid footing than what the Baylor program that Scott Drew and Jerome Tang walked into was. Because it wasn't until their 5th season that they made it to the NCAA tournament. It wasn't until their 7th season that they went to the Elite Eight. And it wasn't until their, let's see what that'd be, their 17th season that they won the Big 12. So, like, it took them a long time. K-State is in a much better place, even though it felt really bad at the end of Bruce Weber. They're in a much better place than that. And everything should come along a lot quicker for this program. And like I said, next year, I think things could be a little bit tougher for them, but 5 years from now, this is absolutely the type of team and the type of staff that is going to have them in that same category of Baylor as, hey, we used to not think of them year after year as being one of the top 10 teams we got to worry about, but we're going to have to consider K-State every postseason moving forward because that we can see that is what's transpiring.
Yeah, and I just rolled into a ESPN stats and info tweet with Gassan and his jersey over his head. K-State 8 straight Elite 8 losses, most consecutive of any school in the country. So
yep, that would certainly seem to add up because the 3 that have happened in my lifetime, that those feel like they're worth 8. So if you're one of those people that was born after 1964 and you've been alive for all 8 of those losses, I feel horrible for you. Heck, if you were alive for even the good Elite 8 performances, I feel bad for you that it's been that long since it's happened. But I got to have perspective in life now. Like, I'm about to be a dad. I would rather enjoy a Final Four run with my daughter than just me. Some things are bigger than basketball, Gabe, and that's what I want people to remember. Is it's about family. It's about whatever else you want, and that's all a bunch of crap. Because I very much would have rather than have made the Final Four this year. Because I don't care if my daughter ever sees K-State in the Final Four. As long as I see him there, that's all that matters to me. So sorry to her in the future.
I think you do, because I think you would want more than just this year if it would have happened.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
There you go.
That's one of those deals where you go, oh man, if we just get it this one time, I'm okay. If the are terrible. I said that a lot during that Royals run. And now am I rethinking it? No, because they won the World Series. So, but yeah, those are all things to consider. And that is the way to bring this podcast to a big time thud. And we are done. I have nothing else to look forward to in basketball this year. So I better just go throw like $100 on somebody right now and just get the thrill of basketball back in me. Because Alabama lost and they were my bracket champ, and K-State is done. So I don't have basketball to cover anymore. And that means we're on to spring football this week. We're going to get our first looks at K-State. And I know some of you don't care about that right now because you're still upset about the basketball game, but it's just what you have to look forward to. And for those of you that love the great game of baseball, Thursday, 3:10, Kauffman Stadium. The boys are back, full powder blue. It's going to be a beautiful sight. I got the tickets ready to go. I bought them like a month and a half ago. Because I've got a pregnant wife, I even bought like the reserve parking pass so it could be a little bit closer and she didn't have to walk however long. I'm ready to go. So life is still going to be good. The sun will probably come up tomorrow. You may hate it, but it's going to be there. And just like Marco Bourne said on Twitter afterwards, November 7th, 2023. Just be ready for that. And a new season of K-State basketball. And this offseason is going to be fun to follow because there's at least 2 open roster spots on a team that needs to get better, and there certainly could be more that become available as well because it's college basketball, it's college athletics, and wild stuff can happen. Your face just lit up. Did you just see something else that you saw?
Oh, I was just getting a good laugh out of what you said about Marco. Hey, I don't know who. Do we know who their first game of the season is against?
We don't know yet.
We don't know, but I would just say whoever's getting it on November 7th is about to run into a early prediction.
I hope that Incarnate Word comes back.
Double on opening night.
Okay, Incarnate Word, welcome back to Manhattan, Kansas. Please come back for opening night and see how that thing goes. What a season. It ends in heartbreak again, but as Gabe said, that's 8 straight Elite 8 losses for K-State. They haven't been to a Final Four since 1964, so K-State fans know it pretty well. But at the end of the day, this is a pretty special year for K-State sports. I know that there are still other ones going on, but basketball season always kind of unofficially wraps it up. A Big 12 title in football and an Elite 8 run, and having 2 coaches in those spots that seem like they're built to go for many years after this at that level, that's a pretty special thing that K-State has that not a lot of other places have. So be thankful for that. And I guess when you go to your pillow and you're crying tears into it tonight, make them happy tears because your head coaches are Chris Kleiman